Punch's sequel offers more great swordplay and heartfelt storytelling, but would be better served as a linear action game, freed of its poor side quests and dated open world. Sacrilege, I know, but look, I enjoy these games. I enjoy these kinds of games, even. I'm a sucker, if you'll forgive the pun, for the Sucker Punch style of open world, a kind of diet Assassin's Creed, lighter, shallower, simpler to grasp and follow around, sword in hand, air in head. Sometimes with video games and their often unfathomable complexity and depth, games like this feel like just about all I can handle. Sometimes you just need a sort of Love Island, an Emily in Paris, an infinite blue-lit bedtime scroll, and sometimes you snap out of it. And the thing that keeps me in the camp of the first option here, the camp of willing lobotomization, is a desire to try and meet this game on its own terms. Forget what Ghost of Yōtei is for a second, and especially forget what it's saying it is, and instead just focus on what it's actually trying to be. In this sense, Ghost of Yōtei is more like a success. It's trying to be a breezy, hell yeah action game, wrapped in the aesthetics of hell yeah samurai movies. Less Kurosawa, more 13 Assassins, more mud and blood, more explicitly Western style. It's also not trying to be clever about this, or at least I really hope not. Western movies are in the most reductive way about lone wolves imparting justice on the land. In Ghost of Yōtei, there is a whole mechanical system built around, well, a wolf. Your allies, actually just vendors, let's be honest, are called your wolf pack. We're not aiming for subtlety here. The setup this time, as it is with just about every don't think too hard action flick, let alone AAA video game, is a good old tale of revenge. As a child, Atsu's family was brutally murdered by a group known as the Yōtei Six, led by the villainous Lord Saito. With her mother and father slain before her and her brother never found again, Atsu was left pinned to a tree by her own father's sword. That tree subsequently set alight and Atsu left there to die. This and a fiery, immaculately staged western scene where, among some deft tutorialization, you ride into a rotten town, flush out some drunks from a building, and scythe down the snake, the first of the six, make for a cracking opening. Your savagery and blunt refusal to die in this prologue earn you the nickname of Onryo, a vengeful ghost returned from the dead, and quickly that legend overtakes you. First hell yeah achieved. Soon enough, we're back to the Ghost of classics, galloping through long grass, following the wind, rolling into minor settlements, helping villagers with little favours. The structural tweaks to Ghost of Yōtei are dressed up as significant, but are ultimately quite minor. The world, rather than the two halves of Tsushima, is now split into 5-ish parts. The first, a kind of double-sized area, is made up of largely grassy, low-hilled wetlands. There are as many side activities here as any of the others, if not more, but the sooner you can break out into one of the other areas, each dedicated to a Yōtei 6 boss and their specific brand of territorial cruelty, the better. Yōtei is wetter, bleaker, intentionally greyer than Tsushima, a stormy game less overt in its big swings at beautiful scenery and more focused on quietness, on the way light passes through trees. Not that it isn't a kaleidoscope of colour when it wants to be, don't worry, you're still going to be kicking up a lot of plant matter. As for those proposed changes, a key one is a suggestion that Ghost of Yōtei's exploration is more clue-based and contextual. Can't say that really stands up. You will primarily be following the wind here again, an aesthetically pleasing but ultimately very simple replacement for the classic waypoint. We mentioned this when talking about Tsushima previously, and unsurprisingly so many points about that game apply again here, but this is ultimately just the infamous Bioshock arrow at the top of your screen, a giant hand pinching you by the nose and dragging you to your chosen destination. Likewise, the golden birds return, appearing and guiding you like the wind arrow. Often quests might give you a bit of detail in an area to search, which is slightly more clue-based in theory. Look for the golden mother-daughter tree, for instance. The only issue there is that these tasks aren't exactly hard. In a forest of snow-covered trees, a single golden yellow one that shines so bright it could be seen from outer space is not the most challenging to track down. The same goes for the other new system added to exploration in maps. You'll get these from picking up occasional scuttlebutt from talking to NPCs, or you can buy them from the map merchant. I love the idea of them, little squares of paper with sketches on them outlining a few identifiable parts of the main map, and Whatever secret, usually an altar of reflection, which you get a skill point for visiting, they're helping you find. You have to match the sketch to the right location on the main map itself, which is a very neat idea. Unfortunately, in practice, like an awful lot of Ghost of Yōtei, it is unbelievably simple. That unfortunately speaks to a wider issue with Ghost of Yōtei. Quite often this game does treat you like an idiot. And this is an issue with AAA gaming as a whole these days, of course. Yōtei is far from the only culprit, but it does seem to have a particular knack for it. While it does an excellent job of removing hand-holding UI clutter, often it's entirely absent, which is a genuine achievement for this type of blockbuster open world and should absolutely be praised as such. It also can't help but backseat drive at the first fraction of a second's pause. Take climbing for instance. Yōtei's climbs are entirely restricted to grey ledges. Grey, a slightly more artful replacement for Tsushima's yellow paint here, though this can sometimes feel like an attempt to defeat the yellow paint meme by making the paint a different colour rather than adding smarter contextual cues or just having the climbing mechanic work differently. It's all very familiar. Most of the time you climb these narrow pseudo ladders up the side of cliffs just by pressing the L stick in the direction of a pre-marked path, but occasionally there is a small gap for you to press X to jump. If you so much as dare to press X to try and jump climb a bit faster or scale a gap that looked a bit like it needed a jump or stop to scratch your nose, a big press L to climb descriptor appears. I'd gathered that, given I'm halfway up a mountain 40 hours into the game, but thank you. It's easy to wave these things away as nitpicks or minor inconsequential flaws, but doing so misses the real point. The result of all this relentless hand-holding is a kind of flattening effect, a deadening of reward, breaking into the lair of the infamously untraceable Kitsune or tracking down some mythical suit of armour in a far corner of the map doesn't feel like the slightest achievement, because it requires nothing of you beyond crossing your arms over your chest, sitting down and allowing yourself to be pushed over the top lip of the water slide. The result of it is all downhill tunnel, closed on all sides, a few gentle up and downs without risk or peril. To think too hard about any specific puzzle, challenge or moment in Ghost of Yōtei would be to try and chew a milkshake. Better to pull your teeth out altogether and save the brain freeze. The impression is that Ghost of Yōtei is a game that wants to sand its rough edges down to the point of total sphericality. It wants you to not have to think about it, to not ever be stuck or frustrated, outside of maybe its biggest boss fights, which even then rarely offer a challenge and respawn you instantly, often at mid-fight checkpoints without punishment or judgment. It's structurally a linear game in fact. Any missions beyond the basic side quests will typically take place in a strictly linear space, a single route mountain platforming path, follow the NPC stroll a largely locked off enemy encampment or castle with one faux open way forward. I'm being a little harsh here. I like milkshakes and water slides. The point is less that this type of game is an issue. Linear stuff can be brilliant and a perfect vehicle for the kind of melodrama and storytelling and bombast that these games love. But that in burdening this type of game within an open world, we end up in a kind of rigid in-between, and that Sucker Punch, for whatever reason, has failed to improve on the many issues with the studio's first attempt. There are more open world tasks in Ghost of Yōtei, for instance. You can now seek out wolf dens and follow them on a fun gallop to a nearby wolf hunting camp to enact some sword justice, but the issue was never the quantity of things to do, it was that each subcategory of thing to do was, after a short while, really quite repetitive. Moments that would make for great one-off side quests, memorable side quests, instead become checkbox busywork, means to an end, another minor charm, as opposed to ends in themselves. Likewise, those side quests, the low point of Tsushima, are again the low point of Ghost of Yōtei. Once again, side quests amount to helping nameless NPCs with comical busywork that inevitably ends up killing 6 to 12 bad guys. More involved side quests, meanwhile, have, if anything, got worse. The performances of Tsushima's brief but interesting encounters are never matched by the various senseis you encounter in Yōtei, which all devolve into a very basic series of tasks you've already completed elsewhere. Clear out this enemy camp, fully upgrade this new weapon's skill tree, etc, etc. I'm somewhat stunned by the lack of improvement here. Such a clear weak spot for a game with so much potential, and likewise a spot that could also be the game's greatest strength. So clear is the lack of improvement that I actually had to make a note to reference The Witcher 3 in this review as an exemplary case of not only proper open world game RPG, but also a western based on a lone ranger riding into town and helping out the little folk. Then I realised I'd already written that in my Ghost of Tsushima review 4 years ago, when Ghost of Tsushima's side quests already felt outdated. In 2025, they're prehistoric. The Witcher 3 was 10 years ago. Like, what are we doing? Combat, thankfully, at least remains a good time and is also a case of genuine improvement. The camera is better positioned and there's a lock-on option if you want it, though the improved camera largely solves the issue of getting sideswiped by off-screen enemies, for me anyway. There's also a much better range of enemies to slash away at here, and better distribution of skills with which to deal with them. No skills or items I could find that made all attack types parryable, for instance. The flip side is that combat can, fairly oft, devolve into some slightly rote rock, paper, scissors encounters. Shield enemies are now best dealt with via a Kasirigama, for instance, a lengthy chain with a shield smashing ball at one end and body slashing scythe at the other. Interesting point, Kasirigamas are specifically outlawed in the Republic of Ireland. For some reason, I guess they're a big hit in the black market in Limerick, but I pointed this out in an Assassin's Creed Shadows video a few months back as well. It's just really weird that, you go years and years and years without even knowing what a Kasirigama is, and all of a sudden there's 2 video games where it's a signature weapon, like a sort of Armageddon and Deep Impact of Western developed games set in Japan where you play a wee woman who loves hitting guys with a big chain. What remains, nevertheless, is a really sharp combat system. That old hybrid of Arkham and Sekiro continues through the trademark flow of parries and counters that has become ever more prevalent since Ghost of Tsushima arrived in 2021. Here, however, it's still wonderfully honed to the character at hand. A sad and furious Atsu, a wounded animal who's animated with glorious brutality and poise. There remains nothing cooler in third-person action games than Atsu, standing head to toe in mud and blood, surrounded by the dispatched bodies of a dozen arrogant grunts, flicking her sword free of their blood and slowly guiding it back into its sheath. As with Ghost of Tsushima again, Yōtei's performances and facial animation, at least in the flashiest pre-rendered cutscenes, remain a highlight. Though presentation as a whole can be quite a mixed bag, those pre-rendered cutscenes are gorgeous, intricately lit, photographed as an immaculate facsimile of Western style and staples, all letterboxed eyes and doorway silhouettes. The in-engine cutscenes, of which there are far more obviously, are a little clunkier, while on-the-ground conversations are unfortunately really quite dated again. Expect a lot of very wide, slowly panning shots of 2 static marionettes wagging chins at one another in an empty field, maybe with a skidding bear in the background. I don't particularly mind this. Video games are video games. This is what they do, but in a game that makes such noise about its cinematic inspirations and aspirations, it just doesn't fly. You can't invoke the name of Akira Kurosawa of all directors even once and get away with this. Still, the performances. Erika Ishii gives a pouty, sullen, but sincerely vulnerable and authentic turn as Atsu here. Lord Saito, her arch-nemesis, has the perfect gentleness and unnerving warmth to offset here. A cruel villain with a cuddly aura and sad eyes that imply a cycle of harm as opposed to a plain old sort of moustache-twirling evil. That also is Yōtei's storytelling strength. Ostensibly this is a revenge story, but really it's a story of trauma and its recurring nature, laden with anguish, genuine pain, angst. Again, subtlety is often left at the door. Yōtei's biggest moments are repeatedly predictable, but in an action flick that's fine. Without spoiling anything, the only issue is Atsu's arc. As with any for a character who begins at peak vengefulness and must go somewhere in 30 odd hours of narrative time, it's hard to reconcile with where the plot needs to go by its conclusion. As with so much Ghost of Yōtei though, this all works much better when you just don't think about it. And I don't mean this as a pejorative. Without the overly po-faced, grandiose vibes of the first game, Ghost of Yōtei has a clearer vision of what it is. There's less of the clash between modern, populist Hollywood and the classics here, less of a tension between high and low art, entertainment and art and not art, however you choose to define it. This is just straight, well-trodden, blockbuster stuff. And sometimes that's all you want. There is a place for that, but it has flaws, and unfortunately it's our job to point them out. 3 stars, baby! way. If you enjoyed that review, please like and subscribe, and if you didn't, just have a pop at us in the comments, everyone else does.
Now is a great time to score some incredible games through Humble Choice. Live now through to October 7th, you can grab WWE 2K25, Destiny 2 Legacy Collection, The Plucky Squire, Return to Monkey Island, and more. Whether you're building up your backlog or discovering something new, this is the perfect time to pick up these fan favourites. Plus, every purchase supports a good cause, with this month's featured charity being Team Rubicon. Get a curated mix of PC games every month, all for just £11.49 a month.